Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Nice to see you in the chair today. It's a pleasure to rise on behalf of the residents of Simcoe North, and I will be splitting my time with the wonderful new member from Souris Moose Mountain, who will, I'm sure, make a wonderful...
I'm going to interrupt the member. There seems to be a device very close to the micro that makes it easier for the interpreters to do their work. The member can now continue.
Thank you very much. My apologies to our wonderful friends in interpretation. If it is no longer, if it's an issue, please let me know. Let's get right into it. It must be really difficult to be a Liberal member of Parliament today, because here are the headlines following the budget. This is how you measure how the budget is being taken. Budget shows Carney doesn't know how tough it is out there on Main Street.
To use the name of the Prime Minister or any cabinet minister, whether directly or indirectly. So when we're referring to quotations, it is best then to refer to the title of the member we're referring to, and I will let the member for Simcoe North resume.
Apologies. Old habits die hard, Mr. Chair. The budget shows the Prime Minister doesn't know how tough it out there is on Main Street. The Liberals' growing deficit of trust, another headline read. Another one, after all the hype, the Prime Minister's first budget fails to meet the moment. Once again, the Prime Minister doesn't live up to the hype, was another one. Followed by, when the big day came, it wasn't quite as advertised. Reuters writes, the Prime Minister's budget falls short on a vow to transform the Canadian economy, and perhaps the most devastating from Mr. Don Drummond, who was in the Chrétien-era finance department. He co-wrote a generational budget that does little but set federal spending adrift. Mr. Chair, that basically sums up the response to the budget. But if you're wondering how the last 10 years go, you only actually have to look at the budget itself. The government writes in its own budget on page 53, if Canada's productivity growth had matched the U.S. from 2017 to 2023, the median income of a family with one child would be nearly $11,000 higher. That is in the government's own publication, an absolute damning account of how it has been under this Liberal government. I am shocked that that made it to print. I'm shocked that that made it to print, that they would admit how badly it has been going for this government. Now, the last 10 years have been difficult. We're trying to get over the hangover of Prime Minister Trudeau. And this budget actually does a number of reversals, or completes a number of reversals of the former Prime Minister Trudeau's legacy. The digital services tax is gone, the luxury tax is gone, the underused housing tax is gone, the capital gains tax is gone. They have flipped completely on stable coins and Bitcoin in this budget. Before, they made that a political football and put us behind the 8 ball when the leader of the official opposition said that Canada should be a fintech capital of the world. This government made it a political issue. And instead set back fintech innovation in this country. Now they're saying they want to be part of the fintech revolution. They're now saying they might get rid of the emissions cap. And of course, now they cancel what they're calling the divisive carbon tax. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but you can't get a medal just for reversing the damage that you've done. And all this talk about economic activity in the budget that's going to happen is just, it might not even occur. I mean, if you think about the super deduction, what they're hanging their hat on, the super deduction is only about a couple $100 million a year of additional stimulus than what was already there. They should have adopted the conservative idea, which was to provide capital gains relief for Canadians or Canadian businesses when they sell an asset, if they reinvested those assets in Canada. Even the government's very overhyped GST cut for first-time home buyers is only going to help a couple thousand of home purchasers a year. They could have adopted the conservative idea, which was to cut the GST off of all homes that are built in the year. That would help a far greater number of people and promote home building in this country. Remember, the government said that it was going to get a lot of productive investments from SDTC and in the green energy revolution. They said we would see more productivity from electric vehicles or vaccine production facilities or ventilators that never ended up being even built. The Prime Minister ends up having and is setting himself up to have a serious credibility problem, Mr. Chair. He supported the carbon tax all along the way and even disagreed with Prime Minister Trudeau when they took the carbon tax off of Atlantic Canadians, off of home heating in Atlantic Canada. But it didn't matter anyway. He ended up canceling the carbon tax just a few months later. And then he called it divisive and making life more affordable, when before the narrative about the carbon tax was that we were actually all better off for having the carbon tax at the end of the month. The Prime Minister wrote a book on climate change and saying that every decision in government had to be viewed through the climate prism. Now, he doesn't really seem to talk about that very much. During the campaign, the Prime Minister said that China represented the greatest security threat to Canada, and now he says that China represents a new opportunity for Canada. So which one is it? Is China a security threat, or are they there for integration? The Prime Minister is showing himself, that you cannot simply trust what he says. But the proof will be in the pudding. One of my favorite high school teachers, a wonderful man named Mr. Sircone, he said, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much you spend. The bottom line is that you can be wealthy if you watch your expenditures. But the results of this fiscal plan are absolutely devastating for future generations. We used to spend about 6 cents of every dollar on interest on the national debt. That is, paying interest payments on the national debt. That is now projected to more than double to 13 cents of every dollar. That is going to be about $76 billion of money going to bondholders and bankers instead of paying for social services. Even the IMF, that this government loves to trot out because they love multilateral institutions, even the IMF says the amount of money that a government spends on interest on the debt has a corresponding decline in the amount of money that is spent on social services. The government also is borrowing record amounts of money in the bond markets each year. Why does that matter? Well, that matters for two reasons. One, they always borrow on the short term, which means they have to roll this debt over year after year. It means the government is very sensitive to interest rate increases. And the Bank of Canada has warned now that 40% of the purchasers of government debt are actually hedge funds. And these hedge funds rely on buying and selling major government debts from all over the world and trading them immediately. If that system does not continue to work as it's working, we will see yields spike in Canada. That means higher interest rates. Higher interest rates means higher debt service costs. So we're already spending more on servicing the debt than we send to the provinces for healthcare every year. We are spending more on servicing our debt than the government takes in from the GST every year. So the GST that we pay, that Canadians pay every day on every purchase they make, whether it's a car or you're at a grocery store for some items, or you're buying clothing for some kids, or you're buying basically anything, that amount of money on the GST on every receipt that you see doesn't even cover the interest payments on the national debt. Mr. Chair, it is for these reasons that we cannot support this budget. The finance minister now has a new fiscal anchor, and I'm willing to bet that that fiscal anchor of deficit to the GDP will be broken because he's already close to breaking the fiscal anchor he's just set for himself in this budget just 2 days ago. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for his remarks today. I have two questions, I guess, and he's pretty artful. I'm sure he can answer both. I do think the Conservatives need to pick a lane on China. I hear members of Parliament standing up, particularly from the Western provinces, talking about the importance of engaging China to be able to remove canola tariffs. This member suggests that engaging China is a bad idea. So I think the Conservatives ought to get their position clear about where they stand on that engagement. But more importantly, on the debt that the member had referenced, he talks about this being catastrophic, that it's unsustainable. Will the member at least recognize that we're spending about 10 cents of every dollar on debt servicing? In 1990, it was 35 cents. We are nowhere near the fiscal trajectory we were back in 1990, and the government's plan is sustainable over time.
Honourable member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the questions from my good friend and colleague. They're not on a sustainable track because they have more than doubled the amount we spend on debt service costs, and it's only going up, and that's if nothing changes. So it was 6 cents in 2015. It's going to be 13 cents in just a couple years, and that's if absolutely nothing changes. So I don't believe that this is a sustainable path. Even former bank governor David Dodge says you have to be really worried when the government gets over the 10% or 10 cents of every dollar spent. And at least as it relates to China, it's actually the Prime Minister that has to answer to this House why just a few short months ago he said China represented the greatest security threat to this country, and now he seems to be engaging them and playing footsie with them under the table.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires de l'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my colleague from Simcoe for his speech. Earlier, his colleague from York Centre said something in his own speech. He said that Canada was importing oil from Russia. I asked him to give me some details and some numbers because I know that it's not allowed. Canada has banned oil imports from Russia since 2022, and we already hadn't been importing oil from Russia since 2019. He said that we imported Russian oil last year, and also we had imported oil from Venezuela. I think we can have debates and disagreements, but we need to base those on facts. And if it's true that Canada is still importing through loopholes that I'm not aware of, oil from Russia and Venezuela, as a supporter of Ukraine myself, I would find that completely unacceptable and would have to be denounced. I'd like to know if it's the position of the party, the Conservative Party, to say that Canada is still, despite the ban, importing oil from Russia.
Honourable member for Simcoe North.
I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. Unfortunately, I did not hear the intervention from my honourable colleague, and I'm not sure the stat that he's referring to, although I do believe that there have been some credible sources that suggest because certain oil is being mixed from certain jurisdictions in the world, that some shipments of oil around the world may contain Russian oil. And that is obviously something that would be very concerning if any of that oil ends up on Canadian shores.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The Honourable member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This budget actually spends a lot of money on some things, but it is also promising to cut spending, including to services that Canadians really value. I asked a question about this earlier this morning and was supposed to be reassured from an answer by my colleagues that the CRA would be stepping in to improve efficiencies by filing tax returns presumptively for a number of Canadians. With the CRA's accuracy rate below 20% in the cases of humans and only at a third in the cases of its chatbots, I'm wondering if the honourable member could comment a little bit on the importance of these services to Canadians and the importance of improving government services, especially at this critical time for our country. Thank you.
Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Chair, we absolutely need to improve the services for Canadians. But I would caution the government when they want to increase services that don't exist today for Canadians, while they still have 2-hour waits on hold at the CRA when you call them. I'm not sure giving them additional things to do is actually going to provide the service they think. CRA has actually already been trying to file taxes on behalf of millions of Canadians that don't file taxes through a telefile program. That has been the results of that have been incredibly underwhelming. So I'm unclear what they think they're going to be able to achieve by doing this. And by the way, do you trust the CRA to do your taxes properly on your behalf? I think it sounds like a bit of conflict of interest.